this. Too many things. I'm going to talk about Psychonauts. How many people have played Psychonauts at all? How many people have completed it? Cool. Okay, so for those that haven't, Psychonauts is a sort of 3D platformer action game stroke. It's got some adventure game elements and puzzly things going on. It's a bit schizophrenic in that respect, but it came out almost exactly 10 years ago. I think it had its 10th anniversary a couple of weeks ago. And it's about a boy called Raz who sneaks into a summer camp for psychics. And so because it's about psychics, most of the levels happen entirely inside people's heads. Early on, you're going into the heads of the teachers in the camp. And so they have sort of things in their head that they've constructed to teach you, and then later on you're going into people's heads to help them with their problems. It's fairly infamous. It was very much a excellent critical reception but poor sales kind of game. Very much a cult classic later on, especially once it was re-released on PC. It was mostly infamous for being made by Tim Schafer, who made the Monkey Island games with others, among many other things. And it actually came from the game Full Throttle. If anyone's played that, it was the first game that Schafer helmed at LucasArts. And he had this sequence that he wanted to do that was sort of a peyote dream. And it got cut as not suitable, but that sort of inspired him to do this thing that was going into people's psyches later on. Beyond what Schafer was offering, the writing was helped by Eric Walpole, who wrote the Old Man Murray website, if anyone knows that, and later on went to write for Portal. The score is by Peter McConnell. When I originally was doing this talk, I was going to do it with someone else, and I was just going to do a section purely on the score called Gratuitous Buffoonery, but no one wants to hear me crush on McConnell for 15 minutes, so we'll ignore that. And the art was very much styled on the sort of gallery art that a man called Scott Campbell did, who was the primary art director. So you've got this very distinctive thing, and every level looks completely different. This is in the mind of someone who's a bullfighter, sort of, and the idea is that it looks like a black velvet painting. This is from the mind of a conspiracy theorist. So this is a secret agent who's disguising himself as a man watering the plants in his garden very convincingly. But the mind is so twisted that you've got this bizarre thing that happens repeatedly, actually. A lot of the levels don't treat gravity normally. Several years before Super Mario Galaxy came out, so that was kind of interesting in itself. But there are actually quite a lot of negative reviews of, well, not negative reviews, but there's a lot negative to be said about the game. And there's a question of, as much as it's really interesting, is it actually that good? I mean, these levels are really cool, but they're also confusing as hell to navigate. A lot of people get lost. This one especially, a lot of people get lost in. The tutorials vary between quite clever in how they teach you things and having gapingly obvious flaws that can really cause people to get lost, which is quite frustrating. The Windows version is a bit unreliable sometimes, though it's at least quite charming about it, calling itself the most excellent game, Psychonauts. And there are so many collectibles. It's not Donkey Kong 64 levels of aggravating, but there are side challenge markers, there are side cards which you convert into side challenge markers, there are scavenger hunt items, there are brains, there are arrowheads, normal, psychic, and deep, and you'll probably spend half an hour looking for deep arrowheads in order to actually progress. There are mental vaults, there are emotional baggage which you have to sort, there's mental cobwebs which you convert into side cards, which you convert into side markers, and there are figments of the imagination, of which there are 10 in this screenshot, which it's a bit dark to even try and see them, but there are 10 of them, and most of them are moving, and it's incredibly aggravating. And the less said about the meat circus, the better. So the question arrives, if all the best things about this game are about the aesthetic and the narrative, and the worst things about it are mechanical, why doesn't Tim Schafer just make a movie already? And there's a lot to be said for the sort of amount of imagination that goes into a lot of Double Fine games. But I think the real reason why these games shine as games, and seriously, Psychonauts is up in my top games ever. I have replayed it an insane number of times, is about narrative discovery. This screenshot is from Dark Souls, and it's mostly unreadable. But so much of Dark Souls' plot, the game will never tell you. Almost to a fault, like, if you don't look for it, you'll have very little clue why you're actually doing what you're doing. But if you have a look around the environment, and if you look around the descriptions of the items, which is what is here, you can actually find out quite a bit. And this is something that only games can really offer. And it's something that games like Dear Esther, Gone Home, The Stanley Parable, or Eidolon lean on exclusively. There's a lot of enjoyment to get out of that, just having to find the plot on your own. So thinking about that kind of led me to thinking, if this is the thing that I like most about Psychonauts, why does it do this really well? So there are a few things. It deals in the small things. Again, so I don't know how obvious this is, but this frieze along the bottom is all little rabbits and carrots. And I'm not going to say where this is. This possibly wasn't the greatest screenshot for this. But anyone who's... I came across this in like my third or fourth or fifth playthrough, never noticed it. But just stumbling across this, I literally laughed out loud because it's such an obvious pointer to the plot, but it's so hidden away. When I was going through taking screenshots, I noticed in the conspiracy theorist games, at one point you go to a book repository, which is kind of a joke in itself, but all the books have little Illuminati symbols on them. I'd never noticed that, and I have played this game so many times. It's those little things that bring a ton of joy and mean that even though you're playing a very linear game and you've not got the expansive open world of a Bethesda game or whatever, you can come back to it and it's still an incredibly joyous experience. The story is integrated into the mechanics. So these are all how the main character appears to other people. Because at one point you get the ability to use clairvoyance. And it's kind of, there's a level that's basically all, it's like an adventure game, it's very puzzly. There's kind of a pointless mini-boss that is basically just in there to kill time, and I swear was probably some kind of publisher interference because it kind of interferes with the flow of it. Because until then you're always using this power to figure out where you need to go. And this is just, I took a save game from the very end and went round everyone that was in the summer camp and just used clairvoyance on them, and every single person has a different thing that you'll appear as based on their perceptions of you. And there's no indication that you should do that, but every every NPC, every main character, every enemy, every single ability that you gain works on them and will often tell you things about them. You can attack them, you can try and set fire to them with your brain, and they'll respond to that, and it will tell you more about them as a person. The things that you can find are very organic. It's kind of cliche to make fun of incredibly obvious exposition graffiti, such as you'd find in the new Tomb Raider, or audio logs, which really seem to be everywhere at this point. Like, I was trying to find a good screenshot for audio logs, and there were games coming up that I had no idea had them, because they just don't seem like a sensible concept for it, but it just seems to be the standard way of giving out exposition, and it's fine, it tells you some stuff, but you can't help thinking, like, why are these people who are running away from this monster taking the time to talk into this audio recorder and then leaving it somewhere that's kind of in public but quite out of the way? It just takes you, it doesn't feel organic. The same could be said for the sort of companion dialogue that you get in, like, BioWare games. I love them dearly, but at the same time, you're, you know, going back to your ship every time you do something remotely significant, and, you know, Garrus is still in the middle of some calibrations, so you go away and do something else and come back, and it just becomes rote. I think Psychonauts is excellent at putting these things in ways that are very, that feel quite natural to pick up. There are message boards that are around the camp. People will move around, which seems like a small thing, but it's so cool that you can immediately go, oh, they must have something, they must have something new going on, because they used to be in the kids' camp and now they're over by the dock. So I'll go and talk to them, and you'll probably get a cutscene out of it. The biggest way that you can find out people's backstory is memory vaults, which kind of give you the old, like, 3D cards, circular things that will, like, give you the story entirely in pictures, which is much more artificial. But at the same time, you're kind of inside someone's brain, so the rules are kind of off there. One of the things that I love, as I said previously, is that it lets me miss things. This is a map from Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and it pissed me off so much, because I'd been running around Vanishing of Ethan Carter is one of the games that gets the walking simulator thing, but mostly you walk around this beautiful environment and you find these little puzzles dotted around the place, and you can solve them and it will tell you a bit of story. And there are some obvious ones that use very similar mechanics. So you've obviously got a main thread, and then you've got a bunch of smaller ones that tend to use completely different mechanics each time. And it's like, okay, this is bonus stuff that I found off my own bat, and it's cool and interesting. And then you get to this map, and it's like, here are the things that you have missed. Go and find them, or you don't get to see what the ending is. And it immediately made the world feel so much more hollow, because this map covered everything. And it's like, I don't mind you trying to, like, subtly hint that, oh, you can find out some backstory over here. But if you shove it in my face, I'm immediately like, well, this world is just a vessel for these specific things that you've put in it, which is obviously true, but you don't need to tell me that. This is not at all visible, but it is the saddest room in the entire game. It's in someone's mind, and there's a chest at the very back, and you can, if you think to hit that, you can go through into something even deeper. And this person has seemed entirely happy up until this point, but you suddenly find out something about their past, and there's no indication that this is here. You have to find it yourself. There's no indication that like hitting the chest at the back will give you more information. And then you find that, and the impact of finding out what happened to this person is so much harder because you never expected it. You just thought it was a cute little Easter egg. And the biggest thing for me, which is possibly kind of a personal thing, is that so many of the extra things that Psychonauts lets you find are small human stories. This is Gone Home. And the main story of Gone Home, I love to bits. It's a story that doesn't get told very much. But, and it's about the main character's sister. But you're walking around a house that your sister and your mother and your father have been living in. And I was always kind of interested in finding out what was going on with the mother and father that little bit more, because the game didn't it never tried to lay that out for me. So I was finding them out, and there was not the depth of the main plot, but there was that amount of investment that I was really having to dig to find out what was going on. This is from a game called Nier. I don't know how many people have played that. It was an action RPG on the PlayStation 3. And has a ton of side quests, most of which are utterly, utterly pointless. They get you some stuff, but they're mostly like, go over here and kill sheep until you have 10 pieces of wool and then you can come back. But this lighthouse, there's an old lady living at the top, and she wants you to go and collect a letter for her. And if you keep coming back there, then you get involved in this transaction where you're either delivering letters that she's sending or going and getting letters for her, which are all letters to her husband who's away at war. And it's such a beautiful little story about her relationship with her husband and her relationship with the townspeople around her that has zero impact on the main plot, and it doesn't really give you any mechanical reward, but it felt so satisfying when it completed, and I knew exactly what the situation was there, and it was its own reward. Like, you don't need those mechanical rewards necessarily to drive that. So the reason why I loved Psychonauts is because when they told Dogen it was a summer camp, it really is a summer camp. You're in this place and there are 20 other kids, and most of those kids don't know who you are. You just crept in. They've all got their own relationships going on. There are friendships that are strained. There are friendships that are beginning. There are loves that are being lost and found. And the game won't tell you that that's happening, but it will put it right in front of you to find if you want to. And it really proves that. Like, at the end, you can go and speak. You effectively rescue each of the individual kids, which I won't go into details about, but all of them then run off and do their own thing, which will make total sense if you've gone to the effort of figuring out what they're all doing. But if not, they're just kind of annoying kids that won't help you out with this thing that is clearly a threat to the world. And if you look into how the game was made, whilst Double Fine were working on their new adventure game, Broken Age, Tim Schafer wrote a post on their private message boards about how he goes into his writing. And it turns out that for Psychonauts, for each of these 20 characters, he made Friendster pages, because Friendster was still relevant at the time. So as part of the Broken Age thing, and you can go to the Double Fine site and find this, they've recreated the Friendster pages he made for all 20 characters, and the testimonials are often like 40 or 50 messages long that are all just establishing this interrelationship. And I just think that's kind of beautiful, to have these relationships going on that you can peek into. Maybe I just like gossip. But it doesn't impact the story, and it doesn't make things worse for people who don't go to the effort. But if you do go to the effort, there is so much rich content for you to find. And I really enjoy games that do that, and I wish more would. So that's why I like Psychonauts.